Hi. So here we are in a actually very different layout. This is actually my first video I'm recording from E3. I'm in my hotel right now and just look at the view. I mean, like, I can keep this to myself, but it's, pretty crazy. But either way, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is actually to talk about Fallout 76 and actually kind of go over some new details we got about it in the past day. So there was actually a documentary made by Noclip. They made two documentaries, one a while ago on the history of Bethesda Game Studios. You probably saw it. It was pretty popular. A lot of people watched it. I actually have still yet to watch that in its entirety, but I gotta get around to it. But today we actually got a behind the scenes, the making of Fallout 76, and they reveal a lot about this game. Both visually, we get a lot of looks at new gameplay and just kind of traditional gameplay, someone just playing the game, not as cinematic as you saw at the E3 conference. And even beyond that, again, just a ton of details, how certain things are going to work, and in this video, I kind of wanted to go over some of the major takeaways from that. I'm not going to spoil it, so if you haven't seen the documentary and you're going to watch this video, you could go watch the documentary. There's a lot of stuff I leave out. They go through a lot of the history of making the game, and, I just watch the documentary. It's very well made, and I don't want to take away views from him, so it's going to be linked in the little I as well as in the comments or in the description down below. Either way, one of the first very interesting takeaways was actually that Starfield started after Fallout 4. So after Fallout 4 development was completed, Bethesda Game Studios immediately started work on Starfield. While working on Fallout 4, they hypothesized what a multiplayer mode in that game would look like, but they realized it wouldn't really come to fruition. They didn't have the time, the resources, and they couldn't get it working in time for the Fallout 4's release. But with the new acquisition of Battlecry Studios, since their game kind of got canceled, immediately after Fallout 4, Battlecry was tasked with working on this Fallout 76, or what would eventually become Fallout 76, more or less getting multiplayer working in Fallout 4. The reason this is interesting, it seems like for a year or two, almost all of the core Maryland studio of Bethesda was working on Starfield, not Fallout 76. They said only a very small group was working on it while they were still bug testing things in Austin with Battlecry Studios and getting multiplayer working. And yeah, there's a fire truck on it. Alright, so the next thing that's pretty interesting is a lot of people hypothesized that West Virginia was picked as a setting because it could be largely untouched, or that it would be largely untouched. West Virginia is largely rural, and it wouldn't make sense for that to be a target for nuclear missiles from a combatant country, and that's true. We got a confirmation of this in the documentary. More or less, they say that they chose West Virginia because it'd be interesting to see how things would play out in not one of the major cities. They actually say a lot of the creatures are going to be based on the lore of West Virginia, and in total, there's going to be 63 new creatures, so we'll get a bit more into that a little bit later. This one was kind of interesting. They said there isn't raiders because of the lore. It wouldn't really make sense for raiders to be existing because it's so soon after the bomb drop, and I don't know, I just found it to be really weird. But yeah, their justification of no raiders and thus kind of no humans is it wouldn't fit in with the lore. Come on, Bethesda, please. But what we're actually going to have in this game instead of raiders, and I don't think this has been revealed anywhere else yet, are these things called the Scorched. So the Scorched are going to be like feral ghouls, but less feral ghouls. Apparently they're more intelligent than the traditional feral ghouls, but they still kind of look like feral ghouls, but they can use weapons. So it's going to be a creature that can attack you, but it isn't human. They're slightly mutated humans. The map is also going to be divided up into different sections or areas. Certain areas are going to have different effects on them. They might be mountainous, it might be a mining region or a coal region, and they're going to have different effects as a result of that. They didn't really go into what that meant. Like, they said there'd be different areas, but what would be the result of walking through that area, let's say, or something like that. It isn't really explained yet. For example, if you actually watch through the trailers, there's this fireman costume that keeps popping up. One of the areas is going to be a location of the first responders to the bombs dropping. You're going to get to explore that, and that is going to be the place where you can actually find all the fireman costumes you're seeing in these trailers. It seems like there's going to be kind of a boss battle type thing, or just kind of a legendary creature type of thing going on in this game. More or less, there's going to be drops from monsters. So after taking down a monster, it will drop a legendary item, pretty much identical to how it worked with legendary enemies in Fallout 4. The items will vary in rarity, so if you take down a harder boss, you will get a better item, but it's going to kind of be random again, so you don't know exactly what you'll get, very similar to what MMOs do. But the way they described it is there would actually be a notification when this is going on. So let's say it's like a pack of Deathclaws is attacking the mine. All the players are going to see that, and they're going to know that they can go there and take down those Deathclaws. They can either work together, they can work against each other, or they could just totally ignore it. And also, there's going to be these little public workshops placed around the map, so places where you can actually build build but get certain minerals or ores at them that are rare, crafting materials that you're going to want. So they said you'll basically go up to this workshop, try and get access to it, but there'll be somebody defending it or guarding it, whether a monster pops out or maybe one of these new factions we're seeing, such as these weird ghouls. And after you take them down and get access to the workshop, you're actually going to get access to whatever that rare material was. One example was actually something to create bullets. That's going to be fairly rare and it's going to allow you to create a ton of bullets.
And this is pretty interesting because now that you have a whole excess of materials, they actually touched on trade. Trading is going to be possible between you and some of the other players on this map. You can actually sell things for caps, start your own store, and now food's going to rot as well as certain items will decay. So it's going to incentivize you to kind of hand them off to somebody who needs it more, even more quickly. Again, it's really unclear as to how exactly this will work. They just kind of said that trade will exist and you could kind of set up your own little shop.
So building is going to be a component, obviously making a return in Fallout 76, and they talked about it a bit. More or less the size of the settlements you could build with this new camp tool that they kind of showed us. We basically saw the max size of those settlements in all of the trailers, or at least that's what Todd Howard said. On many of those little settlements that they panned over, that is like as big as it can get. They're meant to more be a mini house, not an entire city for you to build because you're supposed to have multiple. When you actually disconnect from the server, it's going to disappear, so you won't have that settlement. When you disconnect from a server, your settlement will disappear from that server, and when you reconnect, it'll be placed back down in that location. If there's a conflict, such as somebody else having a settlement there on this new server, it'll actually pack it back up and it'll give you the option to place it down somewhere else.
They mentioned that getting perks is largely going to be the same in the sense that as you level up, you'll get access to an additional perk, but now you're going to have these little perk cards. You can level them up, but also every time you level up and get access to a new one, you could also reshuffle all the options you have and choose totally new ones. And in addition to that, you can also share which perk cards you actually chose with other members of your group or squad, whatever you want to call it. They really emphasize the idea that perks in this game are going to have that same trade-off effect. So there's going to be perks that really may help you out in one way and maybe put you down a certain character path, but at the same time, picking that perk will have consequences to one of the other paths.
Survival components are making a return. They mentioned eating and drinking. Obviously, sleeping can't make a return because you can't skip time like that anymore, as well as diseases will be coming back. They kind of described them as largely similar to Fallout 4, but now there's going to be a new thing called mutations. So in previous games, when you just had radiation, not damage, but inhibited your health bar size, well now instead when you get rads, you're actually going to potentially have a mutation. These mutations are going to have largely gameplay effects, but apparently some of them will also have visual changes on your character, and it's going to be one of those things that has certain pros and cons. Maybe think of a vampire in Skyrim. So some of the mutations may really benefit your playstyle or build, but have some deficit in another area. And they also said there's going to be ways to make some of these mutations a bit more permanent, but I didn't expand on it. I don't know what that is. The map is going to be between 24 and 32 players. It seems like they're not actually certain on this. They're trying to figure out which works and which is the best, but it largely seemed like there would be at least 24 players in your game.
So the way they describe this is there's going to be seemingly different modes when this game releases, or that's something they're going for. Right off the bat, you're going to have a squad of 4 players. So hypothetically, you could team up, maybe ally with 4 players through the game. I think technically speaking, if you just want to walk around with 2 extra people that aren't technically in your squad, you can do that also. Separately, they mentioned how they want to incorporate a 12-on-12 team deathmatch mode, or maybe that's something they're working on presently. Again, maybe that's just going to be a change in the game state on a current map. Maybe it's going to be a totally different mode that you have like matchmaking for. I wasn't really entirely sure, and they weren't clear as to how that would be implemented. But one thing they did say, as far as the vanilla world goes, and as you're just playing Fallout 76 and the way we've seen it, if you look at the map, you will always be able to see all of the other players on the map.
So they also described that this game and really these servers will have end goals, and the end goal will be to kill a Scorched beast, and the way you kill it is with nukes. And you'll like kind of seal up its caverns so they can't escape anymore. And they described it as when you're choosing to use the nuke, you're going to have different trade-offs for whether or not you want to kill a Scorched beast, hurt another player, or do nothing with it. They really emphasize the fact that they want you to have different choices and not make it like super easy or obvious that you should be griefing other people. One of the ways they actually describe this is if you nuke a region, like let's say there's no players there and it's just an area, it's going to have an effect on that region, and it's going to make some of these highly mutated unexpected creatures spawn. Again, they said there's 63 new creatures, some of these being things from the lore, some of them actually being crazy plants, which they kind of showed a little bit about. Intelligent plants is actually how they describe them. And there's going to be a lot more bugs in this game, which I know we're all happy from. In Fallout 76, all of the creatures that appeared in Fallout 4 will be there, but also a ton of new ones. And then finally, one of the last things they talked about was actually that this is going to get free updates over time. That's something they emphasized and want to continue with. But in addition, it will have microtransactions. And these microtransactions will be largely for cosmetic items. So I imagine that means different armors, clothes, things like that, or at least paint jobs for those things. That's probably something we'll see. And you can actually earn them for free by playing through the game. You don't have to spend money if you don't want to. This seemingly confirming the end of Creation Club, or maybe it'll make an appearance in the next game. I don't know, I found that weird though, because if it is only cosmetic, a lot of the things from Creation Club, like, they actually have different stats on them, so that wouldn't only be cosmetic. And yeah, that was largely everything. They're doing a Q&A also. I don't